able to get the cover page to include hyperlinks.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I like that.
So it's really cool. Like in the document, if you hit this, it'll scroll right to it.
I love that.
Which is great. And then it really highlights like naming. It's going to be really important. So,
Yeah.
So that's taken care of. And then got some ideas for the tasks.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Would you do me a favor? I don't want this to
mute yourself, please?
This is the
Diane, can you mute yourself?
Supply agreement. Just go back in the vault.
I can't hear you.
I know. Diane, can you mute yourself, please? She just ignores me.
Yeah, she's not muted yet.
I know. I'm sure she can hear me. Can you hear me, Diane? Are your speakers on?
She just ignores me. I didn't have any volume on.
Yeah, she's not muted yet.
I'm gonna do that right away. You can hear me. No, I couldn't. I didn't hear you until I had my phone. I can hear you. I gotta get my meeting going. I gotta get the meeting going.
It's not me talking.
I didn't have any volume.
Have a delay.
I'm getting a delay too, so just let me get the meeting going.
What the heck?
Can you guys hear me?
I can't hear you at all, Kathy, except through the wall. Oh. I can hear. Is that, I think.
Did you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
It was Diane that was doing some funky stuff.
It seemed like there was something in the background that was delayed or something. Or
Yeah, it was just
Weird.
like, holy smokers. Because she's going, I can hear you. I couldn't hear you. And that's like I quit talking 5 minutes ago.
yeah, it's something delayed that was happening there or something. Yeah.
Hi, it's Matt. Just to let you know, we're live on YouTube now.
It got very quiet all of a sudden.
Matt, how come we had so much feedback?
I really don't know what happened. It was really strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But it sounds good now.
Hello.
Doug's on twice. What the heck? Oh.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Larry. How's Ben ticking?
Good. We tried to snow a little earlier, but didn't make it quite. So
Yeah, it's fine down here. A little cooler than yesterday, but still.
yeah, it's cooler here too. Yesterday was like 9 degrees or something. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Ooh.
327.
Mayor Johansson, it's Matt. Just to let you know, Doug appears twice just because he's using one device for his audio and another, his PC for screen sharing.
Okay.
That won't be confusing at all.
It'll be all right. It's what he did last time, so it should be okay.
No, he's only showing up once now. Well, no, he was there twice, so.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay.
He's the co-host with the most.
Yeah. So Tiger Woods was in a big accident, I hear.
I hear that. Was he, was it like any, it was a single vehicle, so.
Yeah, the only thing they were saying that he had some leg injuries, but that's about all.
I wonder if an animal jumped out in front of him or something, because he was quite far up off the road.
Yeah. Supposedly they had to use the jaws of life to get him out.
They did. I don't think he's going to be golfing in the next tournament.
I
Who's that?
doubt it.
Who, what happened? Who?
Tiger Woods got in an accident today.
No, he wasn't chasing his wife again, was he?
Yeah.
No. He's just coming off back surgery.
We're live. Our video is live.
Okay, we better watch what we say.
Just waiting for Councillor, oh, there's Councillor Ventimiglia. Do you know if, well, we'll get started. I'm not sure if Councillor Shadu is coming or not. If he does, he can join us. But I'll call this special open meeting of council, Town of Oliver, Tuesday, February 23rd. Call this meeting to order. Are there any late items to add to the agenda?
Not at this time. There will be, I do believe you will be talking about the resolution for the asset management as well during this meeting.
Okay. Then I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated.
So moved.
So moved. Second, please.
Seconded.
Thank you. Call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried, and we'll move right into business. 2021-2025 capital budget, and I will pass this over to the CFO, who has done some work in preparation of this third meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. In follow-up to our last capital budget meeting, the takeaways were that I was to go back a few things. Number one was to review our reserves with the onus being put on to check our levels of reserves, make sure there's satisfactory that we could possibly internally finance some of our capital expenditures that we were presenting to council as part of the 21-2025 capital budget. I did go through that process. My staff report provides a little bit of background as well, statutorily in our legislative framework, that we can borrow from capital to capital reserves. We cannot borrow from capital to operating reserves. We could, however, what the provincial government did in the spring of 2020, they said in order to strengthen local government's cash position, the province would allow interfund borrowing from one or more of the capital reserves into operating. We're not proposing to do that. We're proposing to borrow from a capital purpose to another capital purpose. So regardless of what the provincial government did for cash flow purposes, we always did have the statutory ability to internally finance from capital reserve to capital reserve. That being said, my staff report that I identified was that the projects that seemed to generate the most discussion were our infrastructure projects. Myself, CAO, and Director of Operations, Sean Goodsell, got together and we talked it over about some of the projects that we would like to, or that certainly we felt council was leaning towards more strongly. And they were the obviously the phase 2, Station Street phase 2, the Okanagan Street rehabilitation, School Avenue reconstruction paving, Kootenai Street milling paving. We still had the Vector truck and the Town Hall affordable housing project. One of the things I did take a look at was, like I said, our reserves, and I did include the reserves pre-audited. They're unaudited this time, but they should be fairly close to where they're going to land. And the Town Hall affordable housing project, when I first presented that a couple of weeks ago, I suggested that the 2021 portion would be funded from the gas tax monies. I've since reallocated that, and I'm recommending that we take that from the solid waste reserve, with a caveat though. If we do that, then I would also be following up in this meeting with a resolution of council to increase the sewer rates, which we would do by bylaw for the 2021 year, to bring that solid waste fund into the same line as our water and sewer utilities, where they would generate a small profit and they'd be treated as a utility. So that's why the change of thought on the Town Hall affordable housing project. I still want to remind council, however, even if we do that, which is fine, is the fact that that project is still scheduled in 2022 to, if it is approved by BC Housing, to secure the town's further amount of funding for that project, there would have to be an assent process, either alternative approval process or a referendum. And so the 270,000 doesn't guarantee you that this project is going to go ahead, but it certainly gives you a good step forward to get all the preliminary work that would have to be done in any event if this project is going to move forward to a vote or to some assent process. So the Vector truck, I also am now recommending we take that and fund that from the sewer capital reserve. In turn, if that is approved by council, we would charge the general fund the debt servicing, the interest and principal on that. And I would do that probably over a 10-year period of time. And that would be in the neighborhood of about a $60,000 annual payment coming out of the general reserve. Conversely, though, if we did what we were doing with the town hall and moving the solid waste to utility, those two almost are at about the same amount. We would raise the solid waste fund up about $65,000 in revenue, which is offset almost by the debt servicing that we would do for this particular truck. Which leaves us now back to the Station Street phase 2 as well. And that Station Street phase 2 has to be really talked about at the same time in conjunction with that storm pipe upgrade, because the two projects really do go hand in hand. And how right now that I presented the funding for that is $110,000 for Station Street phase 2 is coming from the taxation from either our transfer from the operating fund or our 9% police tax. The remaining of the money, the $370,000 in reserves, is coming from surplus from 2020, that money that was not spent, so it's capital surplus. 2 years of gas tax payments, which was $524,000, as well as $200,000 from the water fund, $300,000 from the sewer fund, which was already in those budgets. So that's how Station Street, as it sits right now, is proposed to be funded. So, and then the storm, which we talked about, although I know we kind of put it as a standalone project. As talking with the director of operations, he said you really wouldn't want to do one without the other. So therefore, those two are tied hand in hand. And that one did have a bigger amount coming out of taxation, about $240,000. And then we also had 3 other projects that council wanted to take a look at. And of the 3, after talking with Sean and with CIO, the Kootenai Street is by far the least likely to get completed in 2021. We just don't have the capacity at a staff level to do that. Keep in mind that Gallagher Lake siphon is ongoing right now in a significant way, and it's taking a lot of resources. So that would be a very difficult one to complete. Certainly the other projects, the Okanagan Street rehabilitation and the School Avenue, definitely would be, in Sean's opinion, could be completed in 2021. And so we thought that we should bring that forward to your attention, as well as the plaza at the Station Street Plaza. We have not heard anything on that grant at this point in time. So at this point in time, I will certainly open it up for questions.
Thank you, CFO. Any questions for the CFO or Councillor Michelle?
Thank you, Your Worship. On the Station Street, because there's a water portion there, I thought council hadn't decided whether they were going to proceed with that or they were going to wait. But and the CFO's comments almost sound like it's a go, the way he's commenting there. So that's the first question.
Through the chair, this is part of the challenge of the process, and hopefully for the 2022 budget year that staff will look at this whole budgeting process and bring the three budgets into line. By that I mean the general capital, the water, and the sewer really should be prepared at the same time. So what happened, Director Councillor Michelle, was in the water budget, it has been approved in the water budget as the sewer budget. And so those monies have already been approved. However, the general portion has not been approved, and that's just the way the projects and the allocation of funds. So if the project is not approved at council level for Station Street Phase 2, then that money in the water budget will just become surplus, because it's not going to, that project's not going to move forward.
Understood. But it made it, the way you made we kind of were reporting there was almost like a fait accompli that you were going to proceed with that. That's what I understood. Anyway, that was my first question. The second question pertains to, hang on. Okay, so you kind of explained the vac truck. So the concept would be then that it get charged out, and that charge out fee would reflect the payments back to the sewer fund, correct? So if it's used on water, our charge out fee will reflect that. It'll just be a higher charge out fee to pay for that.
There's two things going to happen. Number one, I think what you're talking about is the equipment rate charge outs. That's different than the debt. Right. The debt servicing monies, the principal and interest will be returned to the sewer reserve, of which it was borrowed from. So the sewer reserve will still become whole at the end of the day. The actual equipment rate charges will be charged out like any other piece of either a vehicle or equipment that we charge, and wherever it's being utilized, it will be charged.
I understand that, but because we're not going to pay up front for this, then there's obviously a debt servicing is part of that charge out fee, correct?
No.
No?
No, not the debt servicing. The capital cost is eventually the depreciation is included in that, but the actual debt servicing is not, no.
Interesting. Okay, so just basically the replacement funding that's required to replace it is part of that charge out fee. Okay. Also, the town hall affordable housing project, 270,000 is, I see where it's coming from, the reserves, but is there anything from water contributing to that or not?
No.
At this time, not.
Not at this time, unless you want to give some money forward.
It doesn't have any money. It's broke. But the reason I'm asking that is then we would be able to comment. But if it isn't, then that's fine. Okay, thank you. That answers those for now.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Worship. Since you left off on the affordable housing town hall line item, I'll pick up there. And then I have another question as well. Where right now in the new version of the budget that we have, it's coming from the solid waste reserve. Where was it coming from before this version? I mean, I can pull out my old version, but
It, before it was coming from gas tax, and I should have mentioned that, the gas tax money that was allocated to that project, what I've done is I've really utilized those funds to move forward into 2022 for the packing house project. So in 2022, the packing house project is actually going to be funded from 2 more payments. Because what happened, I know Director Mattis, certainly all council probably recalls, but 2 years ago, we had 2 years payments of gas tax. We haven't used it all. So even at the end of 2020, the statement reserves, I believe, we're around 760 or something odd $1,000 in that gas tax reserve because we've been accumulated without spending it.
Mhm. Okay, so that's good. And what did you say that the timeline for payback would be on when we borrow internally like that?
Well, on the solid waste reserve, I'm not saying to pay that back at all. I'm saying that that'll be drawn and that'll be utilized for capital purposes. The other one, if we're going to use it from the sewer capital reserve, I'm thinking of the Vector truck, but if council goes, no, we don't want to use it there, we want to use it somewhere else, we would look at the lifetime of the asset. I said 10 years because the back truck is generally a 10-year asset. But if it was some other asset, we would probably amortize it differently.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification, because I didn't understand that. I thought that we were talking about borrowing from reserves and paying back to ourselves. So if we're going to borrow from somewhere, borrow from ourselves, because then we get the interest. That was sort of the conversation last time. Okay, so I have to think on that for a while because that's different than what I had in my mind. But my other question, or just for clarification, and I know the answer, but just for clarification, the Okanagan Street and School Avenue projects that we have on this new list coming from 2 different reserves, those are 2 of the 3 options basically we have for large projects to complete this year, the 3rd main Station Street. So if we were to choose either of those, it'd come from those reserves. If not, it's Station Street budgeted the way that it is.
Correct. And as I stated, the Kootenai Street, I know we chatted about it quite a bit. It's certainly the biggest dollar ticket because we're looking at around 1.8 million. And
Right.
Talking with Sean, from a staff capacity point of view, plus the engineering capacity, we're not ready for that project yet. The other 2, Okanagan and School Ave, would be a little bit easier to handle. So they could be done. But generally the Kootenai Street, it was felt that that's just too big a project at this point in time to deal with.
Perfect. Yeah, and that makes total sense. So then my last question is, now that we've just brought up the payback versus not payback, the 2 that you have there, Okanagan Street and School Avenue, sewer and land reserve, and then land sale reserve, would those be borrowing and paying ourselves back with interest over a period of time, or just draining the reserves?
No, they would be definitely borrowing and paying back interest. The reason why it's different that I feel with the solid waste reserve, number one, the solid waste reserve is just over $300,000 currently at the end of 2020. That reserve doesn't really have a purpose. It's really a surplus that's been accumulated in that. We are reducing it because quite frankly, our rates aren't high enough. And so we've been utilizing that reserve to subsidize the rates. Eventually, like we've been raising the rates $5 a year, but that isn't significant enough to completely bring those rates where that utility pays for itself. And I did do the math on it. Right now we're paying the average resident, not the average, the residents are paying $125 a year for garbage and recycling, which is $10 a month. And really they should be paying about $155 a year, or about $13 a month. So there would be an increase, but it would bring itself back into paying for itself, which is what solid waste service should do, in my opinion.
Yeah. I don't want to take up too much time, but may I ask one more question, Your Worship?
Oh, no, absolutely.
Okay, so just on that, this is kind of off on a tangent, but if those fees are not even paying for the service right now, and we're talking about potentially taking the reserve down to next to nothing, I would assume that costs are going to go up once once composting comes online. Would they not?
Slightly, not a lot. Now, the reason why is because we already have our carts. The other areas, like Area C, has their carts as well. Some of the other rural areas in the regional district don't have carts, and they're talking about putting in a cart program. So ours will go up slightly, maybe $5, maybe $10 a household per annum, but certainly not significantly.
Okay. Well, that's just something for us to think about when we're making our decision, that if what we're taking in is so far off of what we should be taking in, that cushion there is basically being used as a buffer as we slowly increase rates, like you said, not fast enough. If we take that all away, at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to have to hike up rates substantially. That's just something for us to think about, but thank you. That's it for now. Thank you.
That's it for now? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Grace, I have you next, but can I jump in with one just quick question to follow up on Councillor Ventimiglia? Thank you. CFO, just going to the solid waste, I see that as finance only, no borrow, no payback. The other sewer land and the land sale, borrow and payback. And just, I missed what you said about the sewer capital reserve for the Vector truck. Is that a borrow and payback? What's the going on with that one?
Your worship, yes, it is a borrow and payback. That reserve, we would be truly treating that as a mortgage, and we would be paying that back to the sewer fund with interest.
Okay, and you said something about an assent process for that, or did I miss that?
That's the affordable housing.
Oh,
the affordable housing, if the project, it's deemed, once we get all our various reports coming back that are required, because if this project, and I believe council wants this project to move forward, if BC Housing approves this project, then council is going to have to make a decision, because I believe our project costs are around $4.5 to $4.7 million. And so that would lend itself more certainly to debt financing. We don't have that type of money in reserve. So in order to debt finance, we're going to have to go to an assent process. But to go to a vote, we're going to have some detailed information for the public to rely on and staff to rely on, so we can make some informed decisions and inform our citizens as to what the town council we're trying to actually build and how it's going to benefit the community.
So just to follow up, you're saying that we would be spending this 270 before even asking if we could borrow more?
Yeah, yes, I would. And perhaps Randy, I know Randy, are you online?
Yeah, I'm here. If I may, a lot of that 270, Doug, is to do with engineers and architects and development consultant. And so I can't imagine much of that 270 would need to be spent. We've already put in a lot of the legwork, so I'm not sure. I mean, you have the experience in what's required for an assent process, but I can't imagine that much of that 270 would need to be spent ahead of time.
Okay. But certainly there would have to be some communication. So I don't know, maybe Kathy or Diane, somebody's going to have to help me out here in going through this whole assent process as to, you can't just go to an assent process and just tell people vote yes or no.
No, what you're going to be doing is the 270 is going to be providing us with the information to determine exactly how much money has to be borrowed, so that you have to go out with your question to the amount of money that you're wanting to borrow. And that's what the 270 is going to do, is provide you with all the information through architects, through the design, build, etc., for providing us with that information. This is going to be a town hall affordable housing, and this is what it's going to cost. And so that's what you can't go out to the public without knowing the exact dollar that you want to borrow. You can't go out with, well, up to.
Yeah. And I'll further add on to that, because if I'm not mistaken, there has to be various partnership agreements or various agreements that have to be signed either with a society. Also, we have to deal with who's going to own this land after. So those type of questions have to be answered in detail if we expect the public to vote on this with some certainty.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, CFO. I don't want to jump in too long. Thank you, Councillor Grace, for letting me ask a couple questions. I think I'll have a follow-up on this, but I'll wait till later. So, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship. So through to the CFO and probably to the Director of Operations as well. So looking at Kootenai, which we've taken off the table, and then Okanagan and School as well. So from what I recall, we were talking about bringing one of these projects forward. I believe it was a request from Councillor Mattas to swap one of those out for Station Street, should Station Street be put off until next year, or I guess indefinitely. So my question is, looking at the budget as it is now with Station Street, with the phase 2 upgrades in there, which would be my preference for that to happen this year, do we still want to pull one of these projects forward to 2021 looks quite project heavy. So I'm wondering if that still makes sense to bring one of these projects forward, or if we should leave them for 2022.
Just before, I just want to clarify, if I may, I'm not saying to pull Okanagan Street or School Avenue off just yet. What I did say is Kootenai Street, we didn't have capacity. There's really, you have the decision to make. You have Station Street upgrades, you have the Vector truck, and then you have your choice of either Okanagan Street or School Avenue. So those 4 are still moving parts that can happen here. It's just the Kootenai Street is the one that we felt that couldn't happen in 2021.
Yeah, that's correct.
So if Station Street does stay on for this year, do we still, because the budget the way it is right now, we just have engineering for those for Kootenai, Okanagan and School for 2021, and then the actual project going forward in 2022. So if we left Station Street, so if we sort of left this the way it is, are we still wanting to pull one of those, I guess, 2 even Okanagan or School forward to 2021?
I think, Sean, you would have to speak to your capacity. I don't know if you can do both of those, or which one is more readily available on either School or Okanagan Street.
To join, sorry, did I understand it correctly? Like, if you still want to go forward with Station Street, you're considering doing an extra project on top of that?
Well, that's my question, because I think the discussion of bringing one of those forward was sort of revolved around not doing Station Street this year. So if we're doing Station Street this year, are we also wanting to bring one of those projects forward to 2021? Or do we want to leave the budget as it looks on paper right now with those 3 projects being slated for 2022?
I think if you were doing Station Street, I don't think you would tackle those other ones at the same time. I mean, you could, but I think you guys have to, there's some other decisions to factor in too. It could be doable. Okanagan and School Avenue, we haven't put any time into those yet, but we could get our engineers to drop what they're doing and concentrate on those. But Station Street, we've got it ready to, we have to tweak the designs just a bit, but the majority of the work is done on that one. I don't know if I can even answer that at this point right now.
But if we're going to do Station Street this year, it's probably better to leave those for 2022, is the feeling I'm getting.
Can I sort of
Please
answer? Thanks. Capacity wise, if we do Station Street, we're also doing the storm pipe upgrade. So you've got those 2 going. Right. You have Gallagher Lake that is taking up a lot of time too over the next year. And then you'd also have airport runway extensions happening. And we're looking at the vehicle bridge girder rehabilitation. So capacity wise, I don't feel that we could possibly add on another street upgrade at this point in time.
And packing house, we have to do in 2022 as well.
Thank you. I guess that was my point then, or because, personally, I want to see Station Street go through this year. So do we even need to have this conversation for the other 3 right now? Okay, that's good for me for now. Thank you.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I'm understanding correctly, looking at our reserve balances, And the question would be through the CFO. We are going to borrow from the sewer capital in order to fund the Vector truck. And yet we have 424,000 in the equipment reserve. Would it not make more sense to use that money first before we borrow? And then next year when we're buying equipment, that we borrow it from ourselves at that time?
It certainly, I'm not saying no to that. The reason I did not use that reserve was solely because I know in 2022, there was, I thought it was 2022, our street sweeper needs to be replaced, and that was estimated to be around $300,000. And that's what that reserve was being targeted for, was to build the reserve up to buy that. We could, yes, could we maneuver that around and utilize the sewer capital reserve then to buy the street sweeper? Possibly. So it's, yeah, I hear where you're coming from.
My preference would be to use our cash now and borrow later, as opposed to borrow now and save the cash for later. But that's just how I operate personally. So second question, and it's kind of around the whole thing. My understanding is that in our last discussion that we did have the capacity this year to take on Okanagan and Okanagan and School Avenue in addition to, and that we were just determining how much debt we wanted to go into. And I guess for me, that's my caution to council here throughout it all. When I look at the Packing House Lane, the Kootenai Street project, the Sawmill Road rehabilitation, the Gallagher Lake siphon, the Town Hall project, and all the internal borrowing that we're doing, even though it's internal, it's still debt. That in very, very short order, we're going to go from virtually zero debt to about $10 million in debt. And that's in the course of the next 2 years. For myself, I'm not adverse to debt, but if we can, I'd like to limit the amount that we go into debt. Whether it be internal, external, it's still the same thing. So for me, and there was feedback from the community. That was the other part of us waiting, was to get more community feedback. What I saw for community feedback in the local media, whatever you want to call it, was that people want us to fix what's broken now rather than building new. So for me, if we're going to borrow money, I would rather borrow money to fix. That's what that's what our constituents have told us, is that fix what we have before we build new. I'm not adverse to doing Station Street, but I believe that, again, to go back, that we should do it when we have a customer to build it for. At this point, we have no customers. Right now on School Street and Okanagan, or School Avenue and Okanagan Avenue, we have a lot of customers that are already there that need new streets and new water and new sewer built. So to me, those become the priority over building the new. And that was part of our thing, was to get more feedback. And I think we got some of that. That said, 80% of the people said, fix what we own. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too am hoping that we can do Station Street this year. But my question to the CFO and Director of Operations is, the other three projects, if you put them into 2022, along with Packing House Lane, does that create capacity issues for 2022 as well? Aside from the funding part, what about the town's capacity to do those three projects plus Packing House Lane plus complete Gallagher Lake?
I'm just going to speak and then Sean can speak, but I would certainly think, Packing House Lane is a significant project. It's not a small project. We talked internally about, well, could we move that project forward into 2021? But just looking at that project right now, walking by it, it would not make any sense, in my opinion, and I'm not a construction expert, to go out and do curbs and gutters and paving the streets, et cetera, when you're dealing with a construction site. Let's get all the heavy equipment out of there before we finish that. So that's why we thought about 2022. Once again, I think you'd be certainly stretched for capacity to deal with the Kootenai Street, Okanagan Street, and School Avenue. But Sean, you can certainly speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, our biggest priority when we started putting the budgets together the last couple of years was to start design on a lot of these. So they're interchangeable between years, you know, to a point. They were put there for more for discussion. I know that we wouldn't be building all four of those at the same time. And there'd always be one or two or three that would have to move off. And it's just prioritizing what we need to do next for next year.
Great, thank you for that.
That answer your question, Councillor Schwarzenberger? Yep.
Sort of.
Do you have a follow-up? A good time to follow up?
Not really. I think, as I said, I think it's important to fix the project, or to fix the infrastructure we have. But it's also important to set the table for possibly new opportunities to come. So my preference would be to pull School Avenue forward to this year and to complete Station Street. That's what my thinking is right now. Thank you.
Okay. I got a couple questions. I'll just jump in. CFO, I'm just looking at the rehab of Packing House Lane, and I see there's 300,000 of other funding source, and I'm just wondering what that 300,000 or where that money's coming from.
That was the developer contribution to that project that we have received.
Okay, awesome. Second one was just on the Kootenay Street funding. I see that there is no recommended source for funding. So in order for us to do that project, we're going to borrow from MFA, I believe it is. Is that where the money would come from?
It would most likely, the way we're presently going, would be internal financing. Or, you know, the other thing, certainly on the Kootenay Street one, and, you know, somewhere along the line, this pandemic's going to end. And I'm certainly, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know, you know, governments are going to want to kickstart the economy in one way, shape, or form. And then one of the best ways to kickstart, of course, is infrastructure money. So perhaps some of these projects would be eligible for that, but there is no source of funding identified for that because we are shifting our monies in 2022 away from the 9% police tax that was going to capital to be starting to be funded into operations. So certainly 2022 is going to be very tight on capital dollars anyway, knowing that we're moving that money back into operations.
Well, that
was always part of the plan, though. That's nothing new. That was part of our 5-6 year plan now. Right.
So my last question, you kind of alluded to it there. I see that we're projected to be short $199, almost $200,000 in taxation to even fund the projected 2022 program, not including an additional $1 million in debt to do Kootenay Street. It makes me very nervous when I look at this. It seems like we're sort of putting all our eggs in one basket, and we're not going to have anything left for next year other than just to cut, or borrow, which definitely makes me think about what do we really need to be spending our money on, and what is a nice to have as opposed to a must have. Those would be my comments for now. Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I guess I'll just comment on a couple things. I think that because we've been doing this pay as we go system for so long and haven't built our capital capacity, that's why we're in this situation that we're in right now where we do need to borrow. However, I think even though we will be going into debt, we're going to be going into responsible debt with a plan to pay that back and to let the users over the next 10 years or however long we're going to be amortizing this debt for to also be paying for the services that they'll be using. And I think that that's okay. As far as Station Street goes, again, I think I'm not sure where the 80% number that aren't in favor of it came from. That's certainly not the response from the people in the community I've spoken to. that I've experienced as well. I know we did do a public feedback process as well, and I don't think that's sort of the level that was at. I think that it's really important that we be innovators and start shifting the direction that our community is going in, because we are seeing a slow and steady die off of our main street. And what we've been doing so far isn't changing that. So it's time to try something new. And I think that this Station Street project is going to be what's going to attract young families, business-minded people, new people to our community who are going to help to build that up, who are going to live, work, play, shop in Oliver. And that's really what we need to do. If it doesn't happen this year or with this council, I think this project's just going to die. So it really does need to go ahead and move forward. As far as bringing School Avenue ahead, I don't know if I don't feel as strongly about that. I mean, I'm fine either way if that's what makes financial sense for the town. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for Councillor Grice, the 80% was a poll that was done on Oliver Daily News as well. There was probably 15 or 20 or 30 comments, of which the vast majority were opposed to building new as opposed to fixing what we have. Just that's where that source came from. I don't think that if this council didn't proceed this year with Station Street, that if we said fixing is a priority this year, we still have next year as a council that we can move forward. We can use that year to get interest in Station Street, get some people down there that do want to build, so that we know exactly what we're building before we put shovels in the ground and what we're building it for, rather than building it and then having to tear it up when someone wants to put up a building because we didn't build it according to what they need. I'm just cautious about debt. It's just the way I am. So I don't know what to say. I like the idea of Station Street. I don't think this council would abandon it. It's been on the council's plate for about 15 years now. None of the councils have abandoned it. I don't think this one or the next one or the one after that would, if it didn't move forward on this particular year. We have a lot of pressures out there, a lot of things to build, and we're always going to be pushing off fixing if we build new. It'll always get pushed off somewhere into the future, somewhere down the road. And yet we have a list of priorities, of which the ones we're looking at, Kootenay, Okanagan School, they are high on the priority list. They're higher than Station Street. Just thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Doug's last comment made me think of something that we were asking him to look into at our last meeting. And I know this isn't on capital, but we were talking about having a 9% this year and another 16% next year to catch up so that the money would all be there. But the question was, is the RCMP, do they require all that money in 2022, or is there some sort of phase-in? I believe that the town of Osoyoos had a little bit of a phase-in issue, and so I think that's an important information that dovetails into how much or what capacity we have for infrastructure and repairing infrastructure. Thank you.
Through the chair, I did look into that question, and you're right, it doesn't directly tie into our capital budget, but it certainly ties into town finances. The amount that we were projecting since we lost the 2020 due to COVID, the 9% increase, when town of Osoyoos was implemented the tax or the police contract, it was for 9 months. It wasn't for the full 12 months. So at the initial payments, so therefore the 12 months that we were saying that like the 1 million or 1.05 million isn't going to be quite that high, but you're still going to need at least a 9% or a 10% increase, maybe even a 11 or 12% increase anyway, to pay to make that catch up of the previous year. So you're not out of the woods, but maybe it won't be 16, but it's certainly going to be in close to that double-digit tax increase just to pay for the policing contract in 2022, sorry, 2022.
Councillor Ventimiglia?
Find that darn mute button. Thank you, Your Worship. To the financial officer, I know that you have shared this number with us at some point over our last couple of meetings, but can you remind me what our capital budget will be once we flip all of the funds that were, the policing increase funds over right now, like what it'll be next year, basically, when we go back to just the basics? It was around the $200,000 mark, wasn't it?
Yeah, it might be less. Right now, what we were transferring, currently this year, we were transferring about $200,000 to capital from the operating fund. Basically, what that means is it is capital from revenue in my old way of calling it. It's really pay as you go. Whatever surplus that we could possibly generate, revenue minus expenses, we were transferring for capital purposes. So it was in the amount of $200,000, which doesn't buy you a lot of capital so what the town of Oliver will be doing is returning back to the way it was 5 years ago, of basically, it's your tax rate, your tax base is not high. And I've proven that in the various slides that I presented to council before. And that's just, you are what you are. The taxes have been very low in Oliver for many years, and the town has survived, and it hasn't been bad. It is what it is, and the taxes are low. People appreciate that. They live here for that, but that comes with a price. The price is that you don't have a lot of capacity to do projects that if you want to move the community forward. That's just the reality, fiscal reality. And so moving forward after 2021, they're definitely, the only thing you can do is either borrow internally or borrow externally, or don't do the project.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And thank you for saying it the way that you did, because I think I agree. Our rate has historically been low. Like you said, you've proven it with the numbers that were shared a couple of weeks back. And I think that's part of maybe another conversation, but part of the conversation as well, that we're in a position that we're in, as many communities are, with lots of existing roads and existing sidewalks and existing projects to rehabilitate, because partly due to the fact that we have had such a low rate, and year after year, 0% increases or very minimal increases. And only very recently have we gone to this sort of higher 9% model with the purpose in the end, all of us knowing full well that we're going to go back to, where we started at the end of the process. So I think that's another conversation as well, building up our capital capacity so that we're not trying to get these large projects done and pushing them off year after year because we have a budget of $200,000 or less plus whatever grant money comes in. To me, that seems kind of crazy that that's the way that we've operated for so long, and potentially will continue to do so in the future. So I think that I think I've said it in previous meetings and in my discussions, I guess really kind of to piggyback on what Councillor Gray said without repeating everything. I have not been talking to the 80% of the people that just want us to fix what we have. Obviously, people want us to fix what we have. I want us to fix what we have. And we have a process for doing that. Maybe we need to, look at that process again and, like I've just said, boost up our funding so that we can get a little bit more done or in a little bit more of a timely manner. But we're always going to be fixing what we have. And that's going to go on forever and ever. I think at the same time, we also need to occasionally look at taking a step forward and building new, or we're never going to be progressing as a community. We're never going to be taking that next step. And I think we have a plan. I know we have a plan that, is a step forward, is something different than what we're used to. But as has been said many times before, what we've been doing for however many decades that's been hasn't been working to inject the energy and the reinvigoration into our downtown area that we also desperately want. And so I do believe that completing Station Street is a project to make that happen. And I hope to see it move forward this year, knowing full well that we're going to have to look at building up our capital capacity in the future to continue to complete the rehabilitation projects that we all know need to get done. And that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Well, yeah, I think we're going to need to make a decision on Station Street and get a motion on the table here and get past this issue. We've talked about it a lot, and I'm not hearing any new material. I hear the same comments over and over again, and I will repeat my comments, and then maybe we can get a motion on the table and vote on this and move forward on it. I know at the last meeting, one of the things that I had said was I was willing to borrow for Station Street, and that we would pay for our Okanagan Street and School Avenue out of our capital funding. And what we've got kind of in front of us is a flip on that. I think borrowing for Station Street would make more sense to me, as people that move down there will eventually be part of the people that will be paying back for it. I do think Station Street is a good project, but I'm just concerned about financing, because you can always borrow in the future to do Station Street, but when you leverage yourself with what we're attempting to do here, I think we're going to get the town into a little bit of a pickle. My main, I won't be, once we get a motion on the table, I won't be voting to do Station Street, but it would be contingent on the Station Street Plaza. If we were to get the funding for the plaza, then I think we need to go ahead with Station Street. If we do not, I would rather defer it and be able to borrow in the future to do Station Street when we're able to sell a couple or one piece of the property, and we actually get some development happening down there and get some real movement going down there, as opposed to just having a paved laneway at the end of the day. And those would be my comments. Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the CFO, is this a situation where we could approve a capital budget to move ahead with Okanagan and school and hold off on Station Street until we hear one way or the other, and then amend our budget in 60 days or 90 days, amend our budget to move ahead with Station Street? Is that a possibility or allowable?
Through the chair to Director or Councillor Mattis, sorry. Yes, that's that's certainly possible. We could certainly shuffle the priority of those projects and then come back to them. There's I'm sure Sean isn't too he could certainly hold off. I don't know if the Station Street, if we do get, like he said, if that plaza did get approved, certainly I don't know how much work we'd get done in 2021 in any event, and leave it at that, I guess.
So again, the question, I guess, then would be through to the Director of Operations, that if Station Street was delayed out of the budget for a period of 90 days, would that affect the time frame significantly for this year?
I'm going to answer that question.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
We can see your hand, Kathy, by the way.
I did put it up too.
Oh, it works. It works.
And I do realize that, Councillor Mattis. Thank you very much. What will happen is the delay means that there's also delay in getting the project out to tender, which means that you also delay when it's going to be done, which also could increase your costs, because we have other communities that have already determined what they're going forward with. They are out getting tenders and are getting their projects up and running, which increases our costs because companies are busy. And so they will increase our costs when we go out to tender. So you have to take that into consideration too, that there's a lot of projects that are happening in other communities at this point in time too, that we will be competing with the same individuals that are going to be bidding on our jobs too.
I've heard that argument before and never seen any proof of it.
Take in point the airport, the great differences in the tender amounts that were given for that one.
I don't think that would mean that you would get higher bids every time, though. You might still get that low bid. You can't say for certain.
Through the chair, I don't think I should be part of the discussion for council.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Chip. So I have one final, my hand won't lower. Oh, there we go. One final question, and then I'm going to put a motion on the table. Through to the Director of Operations, do you have the capacity this year to do Station Street and one of either Okanagan or School? And if so, is there a preference from your point of view, which of those two we would bring forward to this year?
I would say no.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, I will move that council adopt the 2021 to 2025 capital budget as presented.
I'll second that.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just so, if I may, the motion that's just been moved and seconded, first of all, does that include the storm sewer project?
Yes, sorry.
It does?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. And I would say I would like Station Street to go ahead. Funding wise, at Station Street, we all talk like Station Street is a brand new street. It's there and it looks like hell. And you know, it's not we're building a new street to nowhere. It's a street that's already there, and we're making it look like something, hopefully for some further development quite quickly down the road. But either way, the question of funding Station Street, part of the funding is the double gas tax of $576,000. I would not be opposed to looking at borrowing the gas tax portion of the Station Street funding and moving that gas tax money forward to next year for Packing House Lane or whatever other projects are required. But I do think that Station Street needs to go forward, so I will be voting in favor of the motion that's proposed. Thank you.
Any further comments and questions, council, before I call the question? I don't hear any, so I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion?
I remain opposed.
And I remain opposed as well. So the motion carries.
Okay, in follow-up then, I think there's probably a couple of resolutions. I know I believe to move forward with the asset management plan, there has to be a resolution so we can apply for that grant from the province. Is that correct, Kathy?
Through the chair, yes, it is.
Okay.
So we discussed this motion at a council meeting a while ago, and I think one of the questions to the director of operations at that time was just wondering what where we are going to be at with our asset management program, and if we move forward with this funding, what will we be getting for the town's commitment of 12,500?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I had a discussion with True Engineering. We went through an outline of some of the stuff that we've done over the years. I won't get into everything, but for this grant application, we still need some staff time to increase our inventory, street lights, some of the park furniture, signs. We are gathering road upgrade information. The last time we did that was pre-2014. We wanted to do a bit of CCTV on the 7D drainage system because there's very little is known about that system, and it could be a large expense in the future. I talked about the roadways, so they'll be updating our roads, and we'll have a better idea to see how our roads have been doing for the last 6 years. We also have to do some training on our existing tools. We have a light ship program that we are entering all the assets into, and I also want to work with True Engineering to be able to extract that information and present it in a way that council could see all the things, and you can see where maybe more of the infrastructure is critical and everything else. Some of the things that we've done over the years, we've just put together water and sanitary capital asset management plans. Those are for proposed upgrades or for growth in the future. That doesn't include the pipe that's already in the ground that maybe was put in 1950 or 60. So we want to add that information to that. We've what else? We created a framework, a report and summary of the evaluation of critical, probable and priorities of linear water and sanitary assets. And that's basically what I was just talking about, and updating more of that. We've done a condition assessment of our canal. We've done CCTVing of about almost half of our town's sanitary sewer system. Mostly the clay pipe that we have in the ground. We've done flume assessments. We even going back to 2008, before asset management really became a word that everyone's using now, we were doing tangible capital asset reporting, and already started doing that back in 2008. So we keep doing this, and we keep adding it, and it's forever growing, and there's work that will constantly need to be done. And if you want grants in the future, you have to have projects ready, and it has to be part of an asset management plan. And so all that helps. The portion, I think there's out of the grant itself and the money that we're putting aside, the $12,500, a portion of that, approximately $16,000 of that, will be towards our engineering tech and covering his salary for doing some extra work here. So I hopefully that answers some of your questions.
Thank you, Director. Any questions for the Director? Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. So the 12,500 is that already in this year's budget, or is this new money that has to come out on top?
was, yeah, it was in the budget. And so I believe the town had to put in the 12,500 and 50,000 would be received for the grant on top of that, if we're successful.
Right, but the 12.5, we don't have to spend it first and then see if we get the grant, or do we?
No, we'll wait. We'll apply for the grant and we won't spend it until we get it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through to Councillor Schwarzenberger, I believe the last discussion we had on this was that this 12,500 was in addition to the money that we've already budgeted for asset management, so that this would allow us to do the grant if we got it. If we don't get it, then it would flow back into reserves. The second part that I wanted to say was, again, in the last discussion, I believe that the director said that this grant would take us to about 95% of the goal line. If I remember correctly, that's about where we were headed if we're able to get all of this work done. So over the longer term, it should lower our costs if we get the grant.
Would you like to move the motion, Councillor Madison?
Sure. Consider the motion moved.
And I'll second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion? Questions? I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Is that our last item?
Yes, it is from myself. Now,
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is it okay? I have a question that we had from a past council meeting when we got our tax ratio information report from the CFO. And I don't know that we ever finished that discussion. We never brought it up during the operational budget. Is there an opportunity that we will have an opportunity to have a discussion about whether we're going to look at our tax ratio for commercial CO?
Thank you, Your Worship. This will happen when we bring the bylaw forward for the tax rate. That will be when you set your, the ratio will be set at that point in time. It's part of the tax rate bylaw. Okay,
thank you. Councillor Madison, is your hand still up?
No, I had another point. I know Councillor Schwarzenberger brought up the part about the gas tax, and I know I brought up the part about using different reserves for the Vector truck as opposed to borrowing money for the Vector truck. And then, so I was just going to throw it out, if there's anyone such as Councillor Schwarzenberger or myself, is it required that we put a motion on the floor to make those changes and see what council's view on them is? Is that how this process should work?
Through the chair, I'll jump in. If I would deem that to be appropriate, certainly for the Station Street, we've already adopted the capital plan, but I'm open for discussion. You know, we have the gas tax monies. If that's council's wishes, is to reallocate a portion of that or all of that and utilize internal financing, you can certainly put a motion forward and see where it goes from there.
Okay, thank you. I guess on that basis, then I'll start with the Vector truck. I guess I'm not sure what the wording in the motion would be. Is that staff be directed to use internal funds from the equipment fund or equipment reserve to purchase the Vector truck as a priority over borrowing?
Just a point of clarification, we don't have enough to cover it totally, the equipment, but so I'd have to use some other reserve fund as well.
Well, no, I'm saying you can borrow it from the balance that's required. You can borrow that, but the priority would be not rather than borrowing, but rather as a priority over borrowing.
Okay, I understand.
So you would use what you felt reasonable out of that, and then we borrow the rest internally.
I'll second that for discussion purposes. Councillor Bentamila?
Oh, just realized I've been off mute this whole time. Hopefully my paper shuffling hasn't been too distracting. I just would like to understand what's being proposed here. So on the budget, in the budget that we just passed, the Vector truck is coming from the sewer capital reserve. So what is being suggested? That we take as much as possible from the equipment reserve without the intention to pay that back, and then borrow the balance from the sewer capital reserve?
That's exactly what it is, because we don't need to pay back the reserve. What it is we're between buying the Vector truck this year and buying a new street sweeper next year, somewhere along the line, we're going to borrow the money. What this says is that we will borrow the money next year instead of borrowing it this year. What was proposed was that we would borrow the money this year and then use the reserve next year to buy the sweeper. What I'm suggesting is that we use the money this year to buy the Vector truck and borrow next year, so that it at the very least it saves us a year of interest payments. Either way, we're going to have to borrow money. It's just a question of the timing. And what this does is it moves the borrowing timing to next year instead of this year.
Okay, so to the CFO or the director, that equipment reserve has been accumulating over the past however many years to pay for the street sweeper. Is there enough funds in that reserve to pay for the street sweeper in its entirety?
If through the chair, the present reserve, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, sits at around 400 and some odd thousand dollars. I'll use a number,
451.
451, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That money and how that money gets into the reserve is from equipment charges. So that when the staff go out and we have a backhoe, we have a 3-ton truck, 5-ton, whatever, we charge a rate out and we recover the cost of that. And we hopefully what happens is at the end of the year, we take all our expenses minus the charge outs, net them off, there's a surplus, and we put that into reserve to fund the purchase of equipment and vehicles into the future. The $450,000 of equipment replacement reserve in 2022 would be utilized to fund that sweeper plus any other items that are coming into the equipment pool that need to be replaced. And this is where I was actually just chatting at a management meeting this morning, where the town really should do some a fleet management policy, a structure, so we can get a good grasp on our age of our fleet, when it should be replaced. Usually most fleets are replaced in 10 years. And so therefore, and then have an optimum level of that reserve. What Councillor Mattis is suggesting isn't wrong, as long as we're repaying that reserve back, which we would be, just like we would be the sewer capital reserve. It's exactly the same process. We're just going to deplete that reserve and then repay it back from proceeds, just like we would the sewer capital reserve. It would be exactly the same. It's, to me, it doesn't matter which reserve we draw, as long as we remember that replacement reserve is exactly what it's for. It's from equipment charges, and it was for replacement of assets. It was never intended to buy new assets. And so I think that's always a misnomer, that people feel is to buy new assets. It's not. It's to replace the existing fleet.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that explanation, because I think you just described what I had in my mind, and I'm just not sure if that's right or wrong. But there is a process in place to build up a replacement reserve fund for our existing equipment. And doing what's being proposed would be basically robbing that, like jumping in the line with a new piece of equipment, whereas it's a new piece of equipment that in my mind I was thinking we have to figure out how to fund that. And once we have that piece of equipment with cost of charges or whatever they're called, that will start to also beef up the equipment replacement reserve to a point where it's usable in the future when we need to then replace the Vector truck as all of the other pieces of equipment we have. So that's what I was thinking. Just off the bat, when I heard this proposal, I wasn't sure if I was thinking along the right lines or was missing something, but that's kind of where my brain's at.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I kind of see this as 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. If we're going to use, say, 300,000, if the sweeper's $300,000, just to put a number out there, if we're going to use the 300,000 towards a Vector truck, and then borrow for the sweeper, as opposed to borrowing 300,000 for the Vector truck and paying for the sweeper, it's really 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. As long as the legislation or the wording in the other accounts allows that. I don't see it's any different whether one goes one way or one goes the other way, but I think the amount should stay the same. So if a sweeper is 300,000, then I'm okay with putting 300,000 towards the vac truck this year and then borrowing for the sweeper next year, because we're going to have to borrow somewhere along the way. Thank you.
Director of Operations.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to remind council too, and maybe Doug can correct me if I'm wrong, but we did have the backhoe as a replacement out of the reserve, 100,000. Unit 48 dump box replacement, 36,000. Unit 4 pickup, 35,000 replacement. So that'll be coming out of that $450,000. This year.
Yeah,
and
you're absolutely right. There's 171 coming out of that number.
And not only that, I wanted to mention too, the sweeper was slated for about 2024, but we have a service truck in there for next year, and that's about 150 we're estimating when it's fully outfitted and everything else. But and then a lighter year in 2023. But I just wanted to let everyone know that.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Madison, your hand.
Yeah, yes, it is still up. Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of points. Prior, in the past, our current CFO wouldn't be aware of this, but in the past, this fund has been used to purchase new equipment. And in the past, the balances in this account have been large enough that it has actually been rated and put into general and the capital budgets. Yeah, so we've depleted this account in the past to fund other things without borrowing or anything. It's just directing the council to say, take the money out, and it's been done. Gone into general operating and capital budgets in the past. So it's not, we wouldn't have to borrow from this and repay this one to buy new equipment. It has been done in the past. But if we borrow from the sewer fund, we do have to repay it. So what the savings is that we don't have to pay interest, and it defers our debt for 1 year, or a portion of the debt for 1 year.
Just before then I did misunderstand you, Councillor Mattis. I would never, ever, ever, and I have been involved in other municipalities where councils did take the money from the reserve to buy new, and that's 100% fundamentally wrong. And I would never, ever advocate to use that and put it into operations. Now we're talking an ICBC, we're talking a BC Hydro. That's why you get in trouble.
Thanks for that comment. I appreciate it, but it was done, right or wrong. It was done in the past.
Yeah, I believe you.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my comments are, if the financial implications are the same either way, then it makes sense to honor the the purpose of the reserve, which is a replacement reserve and not to buy new equipment. I know we'd be borrowing 1 year earlier, but it's not like we're adding a year of amortization. We're gonna, you know, if it's 10 years to borrow starting this year or next year, it's gonna be 10 years. So to me, it makes sense if this reserve has been earmarked for other equipment to be replaced, and that's where it should stay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. CFO, I did have a question. It actually pertains to the whole 2021, 2025 budget, where we've indicated about 1.5 million in borrowing from reserves. Of that 1.5 million that has to be paid back with interest. And I'm just wondering what the costs, what the value of that line item is going to be for repayment of those loans to pay back those various reserves, because that's going to have to be in a line item in our operating budget that's going to equate to a tax increase on top of our police tax increase, I would assume. And just maybe you could clarify that.
Yeah, I will clarify. Of that 1.5 million that you're referring to of the funding, about 700, about half of it is coming from capital surplus from 2020, money that we did not spend, the projects did not go ahead. So that's where half of that's coming from. The other 700 and some odd $1,000 was coming from 527 was recommended to come from the sewer capital reserve. So now we're down to about about $200,000, and the remainder was going to be coming from that solid waste reserve fund that was also coming forward. And to do that, I was recommending we were going, and I'll bring that forward as part of the 2021 bylaw, because we're going to have to raise the solid waste fees at that time to make that service whole, meaning that the revenues meet the expenses, not as it's presently doing. So that's how it's being funded. So the monies, and as I referred to earlier in our discussion, the monies that we're going to raise the solid waste fees by, which are approximately $60,000, are going to offset, for example, I'll use the Vector truck. If we were financing that and repaying the sewer capital reserve over 10 years, they are almost equal. The debts, the amount that we're going to internally finance versus the amount that we're going to raise in revenue. So there won't be an impact to the taxes.
Just to follow up and clarify, I'm looking at 1.5 million. I got Okanagan Street at 810, School Avenue at 466. The sewer Vector truck is on there, still being funded from the sewer capital reserve. That's 1.5 million alone in debt, on above and beyond what we have in surplus from past years. So that's new debt that we're proposing to take on to fulfill the capital plan that we just approved. And so I'm just wondering, like, unless I'm seeing that wrong, that's great, but if I'm not, what's the cost of that going to be to us as an operating line?
I'm sorry, you were indicating which projects, the Okanagan Street and School Avenue?
Yeah, I'm looking at your document that you sent out, proposed projects to be funded internally.
Yeah.
And you've got Okanagan Street rehabilitation, 810 from the sewer and land sale reserve. School Avenue reconstruction and paving, 466 from the land sale reserve. And the Vector truck, that's in 2022, the Vector truck in 2021 from the sewer capital reserve, all of those needing to be paid back with interest.
Yeah, what happened though with those other projects, they did not go ahead. The Kootenai, the Okanagan Street, and the School Avenue did not go ahead. What got approved was the capital budget in its entirety as presented, which did not include the Kootenai, Okanagan, or School Avenue.
I know it didn't include.
They had design money, but they didn't have capital works money.
Right. I know they didn't get approved, but they're sitting there in 2022, and Kootenai Avenue is another million on top of that 1.5. So just trying to understand the cost of like the motion that's on the table is to save us a bit of money in 2021. That's around $500,000. It's not going to be 500 because there isn't that much available in that equipment reserve, but just kind of it's good information looking forward. how much is it going to cost us to pay 1.5 million in debt? And if we, just moving forward, having that as information is good for me to kind of wrap my head around what's the tax increase associated with the borrowing that's in the capital plan as it sits today.
Just give me a second.
Over the next 2 years, Your Worship, we're looking at 3 to 4 million in debt. So at 1.6%, you're looking at, $80,000 to $100,000 a year.
Yeah, which would be, if you're using 100,000, that's 5% tax increase.
And that'll just be to service the debt.
Yeah, if you go with that.
If you,
like I said, the 2022 projects, though, quite frankly, I wasn't focusing on them. We focused on the 2021, the 2022 hearing from council, the ramifications of the police tax increase. And then when we put in our whole 5-year plan, actually became a 6-year plan of funding the police contract, really the capital in 2022. And what I'm hearing in the discussion here, it's going to be a whole new discussion next year to deal with that anyway, because the money's scarce, let's be honest.
I agree, CFO, and I'm not trying to debate a motion that's already been passed. I'm just asking for some information. It also pertains to me, what would the savings be if the motion on the floor is passed for 2021? We're probably, by the time we get that truck, it's going to be June sometime, and we're only looking at maybe a couple $100,000 out of the equipment reserve for 6 months. Are we really going to save that amount of money to do all that rejigging and financing? I think we might as well just go forward with, I'm kind of thinking we might as well just go forward with borrowing out of the sewer capital reserve.
Well, that's what I recommended, so.
Okay.
It's not big dollars, but it is dollars.
Any further questions on that motion? I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion?
I'm opposed.
I'm opposed.
Me as well.
I think I would vote opposed on that too. I don't see a huge value in if there wasn't all the commitment there. I shouldn't be commenting, but if there wasn't all the equipment already committed to that budget, that would make more sense to me. Motion fails. Any other, Councillor Mattis, you had some other thoughts on reserve funding or?
No, I didn't. That was the only one that I was looking at. I know Councillor Schwarzenberger mentioned something about gas tax funding, so it was just an opportunity if he wanted to do anything. Okay.
Did you have anything, Councillor Schwarzenberger, that was on your mind?
Station Street, quite a bit of Station Street is the 576,000 double gas tax. And I think Station Street, we could borrow some money to do Station Street. And as I think Councillor Ventimiglia mentioned, people would be paying for that down the road because it would be long-term financing. And if I guess the question is to the CFO, if that $576,000 worth of gas tax money were left for other projects, perhaps next year, and we borrowed the money this year for Station Street, does that affect? Does that improve the outlook on 2022, or are we just trading apples for oranges?
Through the chair, it certainly helps 2022. Obviously, we could certainly move that. Obviously, you'd go, okay, where are you going to find the money for Station Street for the 2021 funding? Then it would be for borrowing from some type of reserve, probably the sewer capital reserve, as I mentioned before. There was still some discussion as to the $270,000, the affordable housing. Do we need it all in 2021? Possibly not. So we could use some of that because that was earmarked from the solid waste reserve. What I would recommend probably at this point in time is, as the year goes along, we always in finance, we're always looking at the year-end numbers to see where we're going to allocate that gas tax money. I certainly use that gas tax money, and if we don't need it, we would certainly push it off into the future years. But it's a hard question to answer. Like you said, it's really, you're kind of trading one for the other, because if you don't use it this year, then you'd borrow next year, just what Councillor Mattis was talking about. So you're right, it's a trade-off.
Okay, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have anything that's very pertinent for right this moment, but since we had a few minutes, I thought I'd just throw this out there as a possible conversation for a future date. And I know we've kind of talked around it a bit before. I would be interested at some point in time in having a conversation around like just the philosophy of rolling unspent capital funds back into our capital reserves versus keeping them aside for their indicated project for future use. So obviously the one that comes right to mind is Packing House Lane, how, you go through the process of indicating its importance and moving it to the top of the list and finding funds to go ahead with the project. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't get completed in that year. And instead of those funds, as far as I understand, instead of them just sitting aside and waiting for when we are ready to do the project, they get rolled back into the capital reserve. And then it's not like we have to go about with that specific one, go about recertifying its importance or, proving again why we need to do it, because we know we need to do that one. But sometimes that does happen where you have to go through the whole process again of sort of indicating why it deserves to be funded and why it belongs in the budget when you've already done that in the previous year or before. So I think I'd just be interested in having the conversation at some point in time about sort of the two different approaches of saving for specified projects, putting aside for specified projects versus taking the unspent funds on projects that weren't done, not completed, but weren't even started, and rolling them back into the capital reserve. I don't know if that would be interesting to anyone else, but it would be interesting to me.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. I would hope maybe the CAO would take note of that, and it could come back to a committee of the whole at some point in the future to have a good discussion on how capital is funded.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question to the CFO. I know that he had mentioned previously that the money for Gallagher Lake from the province was not forthcoming in a timely manner. Just out of curiosity, has that issue been resolved, or is it still outstanding?
Mr. Mayor.
Whoops, that?
I was going to actually ask the mayor to, perhaps you would like to comment.
Yeah, I could comment. The last communication from the province still seems like things were moving very slow in Victoria. Reached out to Rolly Russell, I think Monday this week, and he's been given an email from the province, and he's going to be looking into that, trying to find out what the holdup is or why it's just taking so long to get through. We haven't heard, the worst part is the communication that we're getting isn't, yeah, it's going to happen, just be patient. It just seems to be dragging its feet at this point in time. The town has lots of documentation that the 5 million should be there, and there's lots of people aware that it should be there, but it still seems to be getting hung up, almost like the provincial government is trying to figure out where they're going to fund it from at this point in time. I have not heard back from Rolly Russell in his communication with the Ministry of Agriculture or the Treasury at this point.
I'll just add as well, because I circulated a document internally here. At the end of January, we were at about $3.6 million into the project right now. And so it's certainly moving along. And I don't know if anybody's been out there. I drive by it a lot. And so it's they're doing a lot of work. And I see the monthly project updates as well with the photos. There's a lot of work being done.
CEO?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we do get weekly updates on that, and we are putting them all up on our website, so everybody can have a review of what has the progress is on it. I noticed that they're now in between the frontage road and Highway 97, clearing the area to get ready to put pipe in to go over to the First Nations land.
Councillor Mattis.
No, thank you, Your Worship. That I was just going to comment that the discussion regarding the funding, it sounds as though the discussion should be held at the same that Councillor Van der Meulen referred to, that the province should have the same discussion. That once the money's committed, it should be set aside possibly, as opposed to rolling back in to the budget and disappearing and wondering where the heck we're going to get it from when the project comes around. That same discussion would fit at the provincial level.
Amen.
Any other further comments? See any things? Oh, CAO.
You're on mute.
I know I did. I did put a message in there to wish Rick a happy birthday. It is his birthday today. And he also won $100 in the 400 Club raffle today, too.
Happy birthday, Rick.
Happy birthday, Rick.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Why'd you have to mention that, Jeff? At least I got a nice birthday present.
Yeah, $100. That's pretty good.
$100, better than a kick in the butt.
You bet.
I'm concerned about our provincial government, not that we're having to put a lot of effort into getting the money that we thought we had in the, in the bag. So that's a little bit of a concern. We better keep the pressure on.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll move to public question period. I don't see there's any attendees. So
Corporate officer has her hand up.
Corporate officer?
I can't put my hand up. I'm a host.
Oh.
But Kathy was throwing Councillor Michelle under the bus, so I'm going to do that too. So happy 10th anniversary to our CAO for her work time here at the town of Oliver.
Whoa! What? We should be having a double party tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Rick won money he can buy.
Yeah.
It's virtual
congratulations,
money. Virtual money.
Congratulations, Kathy.
Bitcoin?
Yeah, Bitcoin. There you go.
I'll be out of your hair in 6 meetings.
Wow.
Oh God, that's a bit
going quick.
So who's counting?
Yeah.
Well, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second, thank you. I'll call a question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you, Council. Have a good evening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.